photography and print media, mass media, journalism. What used to be photography is just one thing because it has to be printed on the gelatin silver print, if not some glass or some other specially treated papers. That's how photography had been produced for a long time. And print media is just a text, a booklet, right? It doesn't include so much of the it doesn't include the photography or images in it. Maybe a little bit of the decoration, the designing of the layout, but that's it. So there's not much a connection between the two. But even that, it might sound pretty distant to you because nowadays we just read from social media. We don't read newspaper. We don't hold a magazine or newspaper at our hand to read it. That era belonged to the past already. So it might be a little hard for us to understand. Let me put it this way: we usually just take it for granted, right? That reading the text and images alongside each other, we take it for granted. It's just something that happens. It always happened that way. But what the history tells us is not. The combination or the marrying of photography, photograph and images and print media came much later after photography was invented, and the print media was invented maybe just about a century or a little more than a century ago. And for that marrying of the two, one technology has to be feasible, has to happen to make this possible. That is the halftone printing. Before halftone printing, there's no way to print a photograph, right? If you take a photo of something, if you're a reporter, photographer, take a photo of the world, of the scene, of crime scene, for example, what's the way of printing it on a piece of paper? And that piece of paper, if you can imagine, if you still have some kind of fragment impression of what the newspaper feels like, right? The paper is really crass paper, really low quality kind of paper. And photography used to require much higher quality, specially treated paper. But for that to transfer that kind of image, the light and shade, for example, onto the low quality newspaper kind of paper, you need halftone. You need to translate those light and shade that's on the newspaper onto the dots, right? The bigger dots, a more dense dot for the shade, and the smaller dot and more more spread dots to represent the lighter part of it. And it's through this technology of printing, right? This kind of language, this technology, that you were able to still transfer that the format of a photograph onto the format of printing, of newspaper printing. So this is halftone printing. Most methods of mechanical printing can only print ink and leave ink area on the printed substrates. So black and white, right, basically. And the halftone process translates the different tones of photograph into dots of various size. That's a good thing. That kickstarted the whole world of photographic journalism, or maybe you can call them the Band-Aid dots. So this new technology expanded the photo reportage, photograph alongside texts, photojournalism, right? That's what photojournalism means. So using photograph with the help of a little bit of the text to deliver the message, to tell the story. It kickstarted a whole new aesthetic and conceptual point of view that emerged as the result of modernism. And halftone, of course, the halftones continue to improve after 1900 when it first invented, and magazines used picture essays and newspapers used picture essays, images and text. They were designed to work together with each other. You can crop the different side of the images and put it on the layout. Right? It's reading a newspaper is a different experience. Reading a magazine or newspaper is a very different experience. Then now we're reading it from social media, an image, and then we have some text underneath. It requires a whole designing of the layout. Different putting photograph images and text at different areas to interests the audience, and to dramatize that world on that layout, on that newspaper, to dramatize the news. So just the layout, just this combination of text and images offer you a whole different experience, of the world, right? Because this is the only way we can see the world. That to get to know what happened is from the reportage, it's for a report from far away. So I hope I can reconstruct that kind of situation for you when this photography first was married to print media, and how much of a change, how much of an impact it had onto people, right? People who first experienced the power of print media. And of course, we're going to continue to experience in our lecture today. We're going to continue to experience that power. For example, how about we go about it this way? I show you all the photographs that's subject to our discussion today, and for you to first get a sense of all these scenes and this world, a dramatized world, and then we'll go back to each photograph to talk about them. Well, this is you must have seen it somewhere before, The VJ Day by Alfred Eisenstadt. The kiss after the day after the war, the end of the World War II. But let me continue with the photograph. A close-up, right? This is a close-up. What does this close-up do? This photograph was submitted to Life magazine. Marilyn Monroe. And politics. Social condition. Factory, industry becomes the cover, and the dam becomes the cover of the magazine. One of the reporter we're going to get to, the female reporter, and some of her works. We're going to talk about the decisive moment. This is another decisive moment by Besson. And a lot of these photographs were taken on the streets. So we're going to talk a little bit about street photography. we're going to talk about Ouija's and his famous crime scenes, a photograph of crime scenes. And note this, right? For many lectures, we've seen photograph, and they were made in gelatin silver print, and that's also what I talked about before the halftone came about. It's impossible to translate these gelatin silver prints onto paper. And once you try to copy it, right, make a copy from this gelatin silver print onto paper, it becomes black and white. It doesn't have this different gradation, different level of the light and shade. It doesn't interpret it at the machine at the time. Doesn't interpret it that way. Okay, back to our photograph. Well, what are some of the similarities that all these photographs that they share? Try to recall when we first started the portraits, right? The portraits or pictorialists, the backgrounds, right? Try to recall. Let's recall the backgrounds, the setups. A lot of time, they were not spontaneous. They were like set up in events, or maybe just a plain background for the portrait. But here for photojournalism, there's no such background. The backgrounds always situate you in a reality, in a natural world. So it's busier. It's more noises. So for photojournalism to be able, one of the challenges is to log in onto the subject that you want to use to tell the story. The shutter speed, the aperture helps, but you're still dealing with a very busy context, very busy background, and it's in this background. It's like putting the audience, position the audience in a very specific angle to understand this story. That's the authority. That's the advantage of a photojournalist, of a reporter. It's a biased one. It's a biased angle. All angles, by definition, are a bias. But this is the only way. For example, the kiss, right? A soldier was so excited that he just hug or and kiss a nurse. Right? They just released. They were on the street of New York, Times Square, and kissed the nurse that he didn't even know, that he met for the first time. And of course, the reporters later, after this photograph was published, a huge wave, a huge impact. People felt the relief of the end, that the World War II, the Second World War in half a century, finally ended. And Eisenstadt was able to tell that story, that euphoria after the war, the end of the war, that people are smiling, and then it's right in the middle of the photograph, they kissed. Half the moment frozen. It frozens the kiss, of course, and the kiss frozens the excitement. This is a very different photograph, also by the same photojournalist, Eisenstadt. The feet of an Ethiopian soldier, a very close-up of his feet, and it gives you all the imagination, right? You can imagine, you're free to imagine, right? Bandit feet. Free to imagine what kind of a condition, right? What kind of really poor condition that this soldier has to deal with at the time in this wilderness. But he didn't capture the whole soldier, right? The face of the soldier, for example, but he chose the feet, the palm actually of the feet, to tell the whole story. Is this angle a very biased one? It is, but that's so the photojournalists, they have, just like reporters writing, they have the right to choose the way to tell the story in a visual way for photojournalists. And this way, if I can remind you, is actually a new way for readerships, right? For readers or audience, for anybody who can encounter this photograph, a new way of seeing the world. We, in our day-to-day life, wouldn't, anybody, right? If a soldier lying in front of you, you wouldn't just go lie down and try to see his feet, right? However dirty it is, however, it wouldn't catch your attention. It's the privilege of the photojournalist who's able to find that angle, to find that element, that, and blow it up and exaggerate it, right? For the cover, as just like the first paragraph of your writing, right? For the cover of his story. So the expansion of photojournalism really expanded how people see the world. They've never seen the world in such a way, zooming in, zooming out, bird's eye view, from top, from bottom, inside of darkness. They've never seen the reality in such angles, let alone in such point of view. They've never received the story in such a way. And it's the occurrence, it's this combination of photo and journalism that offered this generation, right, the people at the time, a more dramatized world. Well, now even now, the world that we are experiencing now in the 21st century is, I would say, it's actually way more dramatized at the time, because social media, everything, the flooding in of all the images, all the information, kind of crowded our minds. But at the time, I think you can use this part of the history, right? When photograph first came along, this part of history, to try to make sense of the now. Why do we get distracted all the time? Why is it so hard to focus? Why is it so hard to not procrastinate? It might be just too much information around that's surrounding us, that's tying us up, that just keeps us occupied.